The photograph you have seen is one of the few attempts to reconstruct the horror of what took place on the outskirts of Kiev in 1941. In a shallow ravine known as Babi Yar, thousands of men, women, and children stood in silence as soldiers surrounded them with rifles raised. It was not a battlefield, not an act of war between armies, but a methodical operation of extermination carried out by order, by paperwork, by men who believed they were simply doing their duty. If you stay through this story to the end, you will begin to understand how this happened, how ordinary streets and ordinary people were drawn into one of history's most terrifying crimes. And if you value the preservation of truth, subscribe to our channel and join our Telegram archive, where we share rare historical photos and documents that reveal what official history once tried to hide. In September 1941, when the German army entered Kiev, the city had already endured weeks of bombing. Bridges across the Dnipro River were destroyed, and the retreating Soviet forces left behind mines and demolition charges. A few days after the occupation, explosions ripped through central Kiev, destroying German headquarters and supply depots. The Germans immediately accused the Jews of sabotage. What followed was not spontaneous revenge but a planned action conceived by the SS and executed with bureaucratic efficiency. Notices appeared around the city. All Jews of Kiev and its surroundings must report on September 29th with documents, money, and warm clothes. They were told they would be relocated. No one imagined that the ravine outside the city would become their grave. From early morning, thousands began moving through the streets. Witnesses described the eerie quiet of that procession: mothers holding infants, old men leaning on canes, entire families walking together in the direction of the WWII district. The German police, aided by local auxiliaries, directed the flow toward a clearing near a Jewish cemetery. There, belongings were confiscated, papers taken, people divided into groups. They were ordered to remove their clothes and move down a narrow path into the ravine. Soldiers of Sonderkommando 4A, under SS officer Paul Blobel, waited with machine guns. Firing continued without pause for 2 days. According to the Einsatzgruppen report sent to Berlin, 33,771 Jews were executed between September the 29th and 30th, 1941. Those numbers, typed neatly on a report, hide what cannot be measured. The massacre at Babi Yar was not the result of chaos but of coordination. Lists prepared, ammunition delivered, guards assigned, trucks scheduled. Civilians living nearby heard the noise of gunfire but were warned not to approach. Some said that in the days following, the air above the ravine shimmered with heat from the decomposing bodies. In the following months, the site became a place of continuous executions. Roma, Soviet prisoners of war, Ukrainian nationalists, and psychiatric patients were brought there. The ravine was deep, and each new group was shot on top of the previous layer, the ground slowly rising with death. The tragedy of Babi Yar reveals how the Holocaust unfolded in the East, not through deportations to industrial killing centers, but through direct mass shootings close to home. Historians call it the Holocaust by bullets. Entire Jewish communities were destroyed in the same way across Ukraine, Belarus, and the Baltics. The system relied on collaboration from local police units and the silence of neighbors. The perpetrators recorded their actions in reports sent up the chain of command. To them, it was routine, an entry in a ledger, a number on a list. In 1943, as Soviet forces approached Kiev, the Germans attempted to erase the evidence. Prisoners from the nearby Siritz concentration camp were forced to dig up the bodies, place them on massive pyres made of railway ties, and burn them. They worked day and night, chained together, shoveling ash and bone. When the task was finished, most of them were shot. A handful escaped and later told investigators what they had been made to do. Their testimonies would become vital evidence in post-war trials. After the liberation of Kiev in November 1943, Soviet authorities investigated the site. The Extraordinary State Commission gathered statements, took photographs, and measured the area of the ravine. Yet in official Soviet publications, the Jewish identity of the victims was omitted. Memorials referred only to peaceful Soviet citizens. For decades, the true story remained buried under politics and censorship. Only in the 1960s did poets and writers dare to speak openly. Yevgeny Yevtushenko's poem Babi Yar and Dmitri Shostakovich's 13th Symphony broke the silence, transforming the ravine into a symbol of conscience. Modern research has reconstructed the events in detail. Archival files in Germany and Ukraine reveal the chain of command, orders from Berlin, logistical coordination between the SS and army units, and even correspondence about the disposal of clothing taken from victims. Aerial photographs show the transformation of the landscape before and after the massacre. Archaeologists have located remnants of trenches, personal belongings, and ammunition casings. Each discovery adds to the historical record, confirming what survivors described. Among those survivors was Dina Pronicheva, an actress of the Kiev puppet theatre. Her testimony remains one of the most vivid documents of the event. She described being ordered to undress, standing among the crowd at the edge of the ravine, hearing the bursts of gunfire, and falling into the pit, pretending to be dead. She crawled out later that night and hid until liberation. Her account was recorded by Soviet investigators and later read at the Kiev war crimes trial. Through her words, the abstract number of victims becomes human again: a mother, an artist, a citizen who witnessed the collapse of civilization. In the years following independence, Ukraine has made efforts to properly memorialize Babi Yar. The site now contains multiple monuments: the Menorah Memorial for Jewish victims, the Monument to Children, the Memorial to Roma, and plaques honoring resistance fighters. Annual commemorations take place on September 29th. International institutions, including Yad Vashem and the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, work with Ukrainian researchers to document names of the dead. Digital projects map the pre-war Jewish neighborhoods of Kiev, linking family histories to the events of 1941. The Babi Yar massacre is a key example of how genocide can occur within the structures of an organized state. It demonstrates that ideology, when combined with obedience and bureaucracy, can transform ordinary landscapes into instruments of mass murder. The documents of the Einsatzgruppen show not chaos but order: daily reports, ammunition counts, transport schedules. The very precision of these records stands as evidence of how systematic the killings were. Today, historians classify Babi Yar among the largest single mass shootings in the history of the Holocaust. Estimates of total victims range from 70 to 100,000 people. The massacre has been studied not only as a historical event but as a moral case study: how modern societies can descend into coordinated destruction when prejudice and propaganda replace empathy. Walking through Babi Yar today, one would find trees, a quiet park, and monuments scattered across the grounds. The ravine itself has been largely filled in, but the ground still holds the ashes of those who were murdered. Beneath the calm surface lies one of the deepest wounds of the 20th century. Researchers and educators continue to fight against distortion and denial, emphasizing that remembrance is not about vengeance but about recognition. Understanding Babi Yar means understanding how quickly human rights can disappear when law is subverted by ideology. The massacre took place not in secret but inside of a city of 2 million people. It involved soldiers, police, clerks, and drivers, ordinary participants in extraordinary crimes. The lesson it leaves is not confined to one nation or one time. It is a warning about the fragility of conscience under pressure from authority and hate. This story, drawn from archives, testimonies, and investigations, stands as a record against forgetting. If you found it meaningful, subscribe to our channel and join our Telegram archive, where we continue to publish verified documents, rare wartime photographs, and detailed studies of hidden episodes from World War II. Only by learning about the past in its full truth can we protect the future from repeating it. After the liberation of Kiev in November 1943, the site of Babi Yar became a place of investigation, silence, and eventually, selective remembrance. Soviet troops and forensic teams documented the physical evidence: spent cartridges, fragments of clothing, and the unmistakable signs of mass graves. The Extraordinary State Commission for the Investigation of Nazi Crimes gathered testimonies from witnesses and survivors. Reports described the scale of the atrocities in precise bureaucratic language: rows of bodies, layers of ashes, measurements of the ravine's depth. Yet even as evidence was collected, the political narrative began to shift. The Soviet Union, focused on portraying the war as a collective tragedy of all its citizens, avoided acknowledging that the victims at Babi Yar were primarily Jews. This deliberate omission shaped public memory for decades. Official statements referred only to peaceful Soviet citizens murdered by fascist occupiers. The ethnic and religious identity of the victims was erased in the name of unity, and so the tragedy was buried once more, this time under ideology. In the late 1940s, local trials were held against captured collaborators who had assisted the German occupiers. Some of the policemen and guards who participated in the shootings were convicted, but many escaped justice. Documentation of these trials was classified. The central organizers, such as Paul Blobel, were prosecuted by Allied tribunals in Germany. At the Nuremberg Einsatzgruppen trial in 1948, Blobel was found guilty of overseeing the mass executions in Kiev and other cities and was executed in 1951. Yet his subordinates often blended back into post-war life. The Soviet government had little interest in tracing individuals beyond its own jurisdiction. The official version of events remained abstract. The enemy was collective, the guilt diffuse. By the 1950s, the ravine itself had changed. Urban expansion reached the outskirts of the city. Babi Yar, once a desolate edge of Kiev, became surrounded by new residential districts. Dumped waste and construction debris slowly filled parts of the valley. The physical landscape of the massacre was being buried under the material growth of the post-war Soviet Union. For the authorities, this was convenient. The past could literally be covered. There were attempts by Jewish communities to erect memorials, but these were blocked by officials who feared emphasizing ethnic suffering. The state line was clear: all victims were Soviet, and their identity as Jews, Roma, or political prisoners was irrelevant to the collective myth of heroism and sacrifice. In 1961, the silence was broken not by a politician or a historian but by a poet. Yevgeny Yevtushenko published his poem Babi Yar in a Moscow newspaper. It began with the line, "No monument stands over Babi Yar." The poem condemned both the Nazi crimes and the continuing antisemitism of Soviet society. Its publication sparked enormous controversy. For the first time, the name of Babi Yar appeared in the national press as a specific Jewish tragedy. The poem reached readers across the country and abroad, and it inspired composer Dmitri Shostakovich to write his 13th Symphony, subtitled Babi Yar, in 1962. Performed in Moscow under censorship pressure, the symphony gave a voice to the silenced dead, using music as a form of testimony. Together, the poem and the symphony transformed Babi Yar from a buried site into a symbol of moral resistance to both fascism and the suppression of truth. Despite these cultural breakthroughs, official policy remained cautious. The first physical monument on the site was erected only in 1976, a large bronze statue depicting generic figures of resistance and suffering, with an inscription that again referred only to Soviet citizens. There was no mention of Jews, Roma, or any specific group. For many Kiev residents, it felt like a monument to amnesia. Yet beneath the surface, underground writers, dissidents, and historians continued to collect testimonies and photographs, preserving details of the massacre. In the 1980s, as Glasnost began to open public discussion, more information reached wider audiences. Survivors and their descendants began to speak publicly. Archival restrictions eased slightly, allowing researchers to access wartime documents. When Ukraine gained independence in 1991, one of the new state's symbolic acts was to acknowledge the true history of Babi Yar. That same year, a menorah-shaped memorial was erected, explicitly dedicated to the Jewish victims. It stood near the original ravine, now partly landscaped and covered by a park. Additional monuments followed, a memorial to the murdered children, to Roma victims, and to Ukrainian nationalists executed there by the Germans. For the first time, the multiple layers of tragedy at Babi Yar were recognized, and remembrance became inclusive rather than ideological. The 1990s also marked a shift in scholarship. Ukrainian and international historians began working together to reconstruct the full chronology of events. Access to previously secret Soviet archives revealed detailed administrative correspondence between the German military command, the SS, and local collaborators. Researchers analyzed aerial photographs taken by reconnaissance planes, matching them with eyewitness maps to determine the original shape of the ravine and the locations of the shooting zones. Forensic teams conducted excavations, confirming the presence of human remains and burned bone fragments consistent with the accounts of the 1943 cremation operation. The findings aligned with testimonies collected immediately after the war, strengthening the historical record against denial. In recent decades, digital archives have transformed the preservation of this history. Databases now compile names of the victims, cross-referencing census data, deportation lists, and pre-war synagogue registries. For many families, the digital record is the only remaining trace of lost relatives. The process of naming has become an act of justice. Each recovered name breaks the anonymity imposed by both killers and silence. Educational initiatives bring school groups to the site, where guides explain the broader context of Nazi occupation and the Holocaust in Eastern Europe. Documentary filmmakers and historians collaborate to visualize how the site looked in 1941, using 3D reconstructions and survivor testimony to bridge the distance between past and present. Babi Yar also serves as a case study in transitional memory. how societies deal with inherited trauma and contested narratives. For Ukrainians, it is not only a story of the Holocaust but also a reminder of the complexities of collaboration, resistance, and survival under totalitarian regimes. The openness with which modern Ukraine addresses this past stands in contrast to decades of suppression. Memorial ceremonies today are attended by government officials, religious leaders, survivors' families, and international representatives. Each year, new plaques and installations are added, reflecting the continuing evolution of remembrance. At the international level, Babi Yar symbolizes the eastern dimension of the Holocaust. Western audiences often associate the genocide primarily with concentration camps like Auschwitz, but in the occupied Soviet territories, most Jews were killed in open-air shootings close to their homes. Historians estimate that over 1 million people were murdered this way between 1941 and 1944. The massacre in Kiev remains one of the most documented and largest single events of that process. Its study has shaped understanding of how the Holocaust operated as a combination of ideology, military occupation, and administrative routine. Today, the Babi Yar site encompasses a complex of memorials and museums, with plans for expanded educational centers. Research continues under the auspices of the Babi Yar Holocaust Memorial Center, which brings together Ukrainian and international experts. Their work focuses on identifying the names of all victims, cataloging artifacts, and recording oral histories. The goal is not only to honor the dead but to teach new generations the consequences of hatred and dehumanization. The project faces debates over interpretation and representation, reflecting broader tensions in memory politics, yet its mission remains rooted in transparency and scholarship. Forensic studies in the 2000s confirmed that despite post-war construction, the soil still contains traces of the pyres built in 1943. Chemical analysis of the ground revealed layers of ash mixed with clay and sand, consistent with the methods described by witnesses. Each scientific confirmation reinforces the documentary record, leaving no room for denial or revisionism. Modern historians emphasize that Babi Yar is both a place of mourning and a historical archive embedded in the landscape itself. Every meter of soil carries testimony. The legacy of Babi Yar extends beyond Ukraine. It has become a global symbol of how modernity and bureaucracy can coexist with barbarism. It challenges simplistic ideas of evil by showing that genocide can be organized through routine paperwork and administrative logic. The perpetrators at Babi Yar were not monsters in appearance but functionaries of a system. Their efficiency, precision, and obedience reveal how ideology corrupts moral responsibility. For this reason, studying Babi Yar remains essential for understanding the mechanisms of mass violence in any era. As this century advances, the task of memory becomes even more urgent. The last survivors are passing away, and with them, the living connection to 1941. What remains are records, photographs, and testimonies, fragile but irreplaceable. Digital preservation projects ensure that these materials remain accessible worldwide. Scholars continue to translate documents, publish witness statements, and contextualize the event within broader patterns of genocide. Each act of research pushes back against the erosion of truth. Babi Yar today is quiet. Visitors walk along paths lined with birch and pine trees. They hear the sounds of traffic from nearby streets, the normal rhythm of a modern city. Few realize that beneath the ground lie layers of burned earth, the remnants of tens of thousands of people. Standing there, one understands that remembrance is not about reliving horror but about preserving knowledge. The ravine is both a grave and a warning. The documentary record concludes that approximately 100,000 people were murdered in and around Babi Yar between 1941 and 1943. The majority were Jews of Kiev, joined later by Roma, Soviet prisoners, and others labeled enemies by the occupation authorities. Their deaths were recorded in meticulous reports, their identities erased by policy, and their memory suppressed for generations. Restoring that memory is a collective responsibility that transcends nations. If this account has deepened your understanding of what happened, help us preserve these truths. Subscribe to our channel and join our Telegram archive, where we publish verified wartime photographs, declassified documents, and educational materials about the hidden chapters of World War II. Every story remembered weakens the power of forgetting. History survives only when people choose to know it. The long aftermath of Babi Yar stretches into our own time. What began as a wartime atrocity has become a continuing process of research, remembrance, and moral reckoning. After the fall of the Soviet Union, independent Ukraine opened its archives to scholars from around the world. Historians from Germany, Israel, the United States, and Ukraine collaborated to recover records that had been hidden for 50 years. Letters between occupation officials, reports from local police, and captured Nazi documents gave researchers a clear picture of how the massacre was organized. They showed that every stage, from the printing of the order to the removal of property, was planned in detail. The killings were not spontaneous. They were the result of administration, schedules, and budgets. In the early 2000s, survivors and descendants of victims began traveling to Kiev to participate in commemorations. Some brought family photographs, others pieces of personal memory, names remembered from pre-war neighborhoods, synagogue addresses, fragments of Yiddish songs. The ceremonies became intergenerational. Children of those murdered stood beside children of those who had survived or fled. The emphasis shifted from collective mourning to individual stories. Each name spoken aloud restored a fragment of life to the anonymous dead. At the same time, researchers turned Babi Yar into a focal point for understanding the Holocaust in Eastern Europe. Field studies in Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia revealed hundreds of similar ravines where mass shootings occurred. These findings changed Holocaust historiography. The image of genocide was no longer limited to concentration camps. It included open fields, forests, and local police stations. Babi Yar symbolized this Holocaust by bullets, where ideology met proximity and the victims died in sight of their neighbors. The site itself evolved into a layered memorial landscape. In addition to the Menorah Monument of 1991, a memorial to the murdered Roma was built in 2016. A sculpture dedicated to the executed Ukrainian writer Elena Teleha marks another corner of the park. Near the entrance stands a monument to the children killed at Babi Yar, small figures cast in bronze, hands raised toward the sky. These symbols remind visitors that the ravine held not only numbers but generations that would never grow old. Modern Kiev has integrated Babi Yar into its urban life, yet the memory remains separate, solemn, and untouched by noise. Education became a crucial element of commemoration. Schools across Ukraine now include lessons about Babi Yar in history curricula. Teachers use survivor testimonies, archival photographs, and interactive maps to show how ideology transformed a city into a killing field. International organizations support these programs, emphasizing that remembrance is also prevention. The lessons of 1941 warn against dehumanization, propaganda, and the politics of hatred. Forensic science has continued to contribute to understanding the site. Ground-penetrating radar and soil analysis have confirmed the locations of the main burial trenches. In several areas, researchers discovered traces of burned structures consistent with the 1943 exhumation operation. Microscopic study of ash and bone fragments provided chemical evidence that matched eyewitness reports. These findings reinforce what documents and testimonies had long stated: the killings at Babi Yar were systematic, and the later attempt to destroy evidence was deliberate. International law also recognizes the importance of such evidence. The Nuremberg trials established the precedent that documenting war crimes is essential for justice. The materials collected from Babi Yar, though incomplete, contributed to that record. In subsequent decades, human rights organizations used the lessons of Babi Yar to argue for the prosecution of genocide and crimes against humanity elsewhere. It became a case study in how the absence of early intervention leads to catastrophe. Today, historians see Babi Yar as more than a local tragedy. It is a lens through which to study the intersection of ideology, occupation, and bureaucracy. The German army's cooperation with the SS, the role of local collaborators, and the indifference of bystanders all illustrate how mass violence becomes possible when moral limits erode. The documents reveal that not all participants were fanatics. Many were ordinary clerks and soldiers who obeyed orders, processed paperwork, or guarded perimeters. Their participation shows that genocide depends not only on leaders but on systems and structures that normalize evil. Modern Ukraine has embraced the responsibility of remembrance. Annual ceremonies on September 29th are attended by representatives from multiple faiths: Jewish, Christian, Muslim, and by diplomats from around the world. Speeches emphasize unity, empathy, and the defense of human rights. Museums and digital archives allow visitors to explore names, photographs, and family stories. The goal is not only to honor victims but to educate society about the dangers of intolerance and authoritarianism. The transformation of Babi Yar from a ravine of death into a place of reflection took decades. The Soviet years of silence were replaced by open discussion, scholarship, and art. Poets, composers, and filmmakers continue to draw inspiration from the event, seeking to translate historical fact into moral awareness. Exhibitions display recovered objects, a shoe, a locket, a child's toy, reminding viewers that history is made of human details. The power of Babi Yar lies in its authenticity. It is not a reconstruction or a museum exhibit built from imagination. It is the ground itself that bears witness. The ravine, even filled and reshaped, contains the physical evidence of the crime. Standing there, one senses the depth of the loss, not as abstract numbers but as the absence of life that once filled the city. In academic conferences and classrooms, Babi Yar is often cited as the beginning of the modern understanding of genocide. It demonstrates that killing on this scale can be achieved not only through industrial machinery but through ordinary weapons and willing hands. It teaches that prevention requires vigilance long before violence begins. Every discriminatory law, every act of exclusion, every propaganda poster is a step down the same path. The work of remembrance continues. Archives in Ukraine, Germany, and Israel collaborate to digitize all existing materials. New research projects trace the fates of families before and after 1941, connecting photographs, letters, and census data. Genealogical platforms help descendants discover their roots, turning anonymous statistics into personal narratives. International grants fund preservation of the site's monuments, while artists and architects design installations that communicate history without sensationalism. The responsibility to remember now rests with those who never witnessed the events. The generation that lived through the war has nearly vanished, but their words remain. Teachers, journalists, and historians pass them forward, ensuring that Babi Yar remains a warning rather than a forgotten footnote. In a world still marked by conflict and prejudice, the message of Babi Yar endures. When hatred is organized, it becomes a system. When truth is forgotten, it becomes possible again. The final task is simple yet immense: to keep telling the story accurately, respectfully, and completely. That is why we collect documents, verify photographs, and preserve survivor voices. Each detail strengthens the defense against denial. Each retelling renews the moral lesson. If this continuation has helped you see how remembrance evolves into responsibility, subscribe to our channel and join our Telegram archive. There you can explore original documents, authentic photographs, and research from historians who dedicate their lives to keeping truth alive. History is fragile, knowledge is its only protection. In the decades that followed Ukraine's independence, Babi Yar evolved into both a memorial and a laboratory of conscience. The transformation was gradual, often contested, but driven by a growing recognition that remembering the past is an act of civic responsibility. In the early 2000s, newly declassified archives revealed not only documents of the German occupation but also Soviet files showing how information about the massacre had been systematically controlled. These papers confirmed that early post-war investigators had documented the Jewish character of the victims, but their reports were censored before publication. The suppression of identity had been deliberate. Historians now had the evidence to reconstruct not only the killings themselves but also the mechanisms of denial that followed. This second uncovering of truth led to a re-evaluation of how societies process trauma. For the people of Kiev, Babi Yar became more than a site of grief, it became a mirror of historical honesty. Public debates erupted over how to present the story. Some favored a universal narrative of suffering, while others insisted that the specifically Jewish nature of the massacre must remain central. Over time, consensus formed that both perspectives are inseparable. The tragedy of Babi Yar belongs to all who value human life, yet its victims must be remembered as who they were. Memorial design competitions reflected this balance. Architects and artists proposed installations that would not monumentalize death but invite reflection. Pathways now guide visitors through the park, leading them from one monument to another, each representing a different layer of history. Information panels in multiple languages describe what happened there in 1941 and what was hidden afterward. At dusk, the park grows silent, and the shadows of trees fall across the ground where the ravine once yawned. The calm does not erase the horror, it turns it into remembrance. In the 21st century, the Babi Yar Holocaust Memorial Center was established with support from Ukrainian and international organizations. Its mission is research, education, and commemoration. Scholars, archivists, and technologists work together to collect testimonies, digitize documents, and reconstruct the identities of victims. Thousands of names have already been restored. Using genealogical databases and local records, researchers trace entire family lines wiped out in 1941. The center's educational programs bring students from across Ukraine to study the history of the Holocaust, and to understand that genocide begins with words and attitudes long before violence. The center also sponsors oral history projects. Interviewers record the memories of witnesses who were children during the occupation, those who saw columns of people passing through the streets, heard the gunfire, or lived near the site. Their recollections, though often fragmented, form a mosaic of lived experience that no document can replace. Some speak of neighbors who disappeared overnight, others recall the silence that followed the shootings, the empty houses, the absence that filled the city. Each voice adds a thread to the collective memory of Babi Yar. International cooperation has further advanced research. Institutions such as Yad Vashem, the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, and German memorial foundations exchange archives and expertise. Joint exhibitions present photographs, diaries, and official orders, contextualized by maps and timelines. These exhibits travel worldwide, ensuring that Babi Yar is remembered not as a distant tragedy but as part of global human history. In Berlin, Warsaw, Paris, and New York, visitors learn that the Holocaust was not confined to camps but extended across entire landscapes of occupied Europe. Technology has become a powerful ally of remembrance. Digital 3D reconstructions of Babi Yar allow users to visualize the terrain as it existed in 1941. Virtual reality projects guide participants through historical narratives based on verified data and eyewitness accounts. Each technological step seeks to bridge distance, to make history comprehensible without exploiting its pain. The aim is not spectacle but understanding. In classrooms, these tools help young generations grasp what statistics cannot convey. Despite progress, challenges remain. The politics of memory in Eastern Europe are complex. Competing interpretations of history sometimes overshadow facts. Economic pressures and urban development threaten the preservation of historical sites. Yet, amid these difficulties, the commitment to maintain Babi Yar as a place of truth has persisted. Laws protect the area from construction. Annual state ceremonies reaffirm its significance. The collaboration between local communities and international scholars ensures that remembrance does not become routine. Academic study of Babi Yar continues to evolve. Recent publications analyze the massacre within broader frameworks of occupation policy, comparing it with similar operations in other cities such as Minsk, Riga, and Vilnius. The goal is not to rank suffering but to understand mechanisms. How did ideology, military necessity, and local complicity combine to create genocide? What signals were ignored? What lessons were learned, or still need to be learned? Such research, though analytical, remains rooted in empathy. It recognizes that the history of Babi Yar is not just about death but about the choices that led to it. Philosophers and theologians have also drawn on Babi Yar as a source of reflection. They see in it the extreme point where moral order collapses, where obedience becomes complicity, and where silence becomes participation. Their writings argue that memory is not passive, it is an ethical act. To remember is to resist repetition. To study the documents is to confront one's own capacity for indifference. The survivors who once spoke of Babi Yar are now few, but their influence continues through education and literature. Museums use recordings of their voices in exhibits. Writers quote their words in essays and films. Each generation reinterprets their testimony, ensuring that it remains alive. In this way, Babi Yar functions both as a historical site and a living text, one that continues to teach long after the witnesses are gone. For Kiev, Babi Yar is part of its identity. Streets that once led to the Ravine now carry trams and buses, but their names preserve memory. Schoolchildren learn about the massacre as part of local history, not as a distant event. Annual memorial services include readings of victims' names. In recent years, artists have staged performances and installations dedicated to the memory of those lost, transforming public space into a form of moral education. Globally, Babi Yar remains a symbol of warning. Its lessons resonate in discussions about human rights, war crimes, and the dangers of dehumanizing rhetoric. The principles derived from its study underpin international conventions against genocide. Diplomats, educators, and activists invoke it when speaking about the need for vigilance in the face of hatred. It has become both a Ukrainian tragedy and a universal message. The physical site continues to evolve. Archaeologists still find traces, metal fragments, personal items, remains of fences and posts that confirm historical accounts. Each discovery is carefully documented, added to digital archives, and preserved. These findings reinforce the connection between memory and evidence, ensuring that remembrance remains grounded in fact. The work is slow, but it honors the dead more effectively than monuments alone. Standing at Babi Yar today, visitors encounter not only memorials but information stands filled with context. They read translated testimonies, see photographs of pre-war Jewish life, and learn about the city that once thrived with cultural diversity. They understand that the massacre destroyed not only individuals but a civilization. This educational approach transforms grief into awareness. The endurance of Babi Yar in public consciousness demonstrates that history, though painful, can be a source of strength. Facing the truth does not weaken a nation, it clarifies its moral boundaries. The recognition of past injustice becomes the foundation for a more humane future. This is why the story of Babi Yar continues to be told in classrooms, museums, documentaries, and public events. It is not nostalgia, it is responsibility. As the world moves further from 1941, digital preservation ensures continuity. The archives of Babi Yar are now stored in multiple countries and formats to prevent loss. Every document scanned, every name verified, every photograph identified contributes to the permanent record of human history. Scholars and citizens alike participate in this effort. Memory has become collective, not institutional. To understand Babi Yar is to understand that civilization itself is fragile. It depends not only on laws and governments but on individual conscience. The ravine outside Kiev reminds us that evil thrives when indifference prevails. It warns that bureaucracy can serve destruction as efficiently as it serves order. It insists that truth, however uncomfortable, is the only defense against recurrence. The story of Babi Yar is therefore not finished. It continues each time someone reads a testimony, visits the site, or teaches the next generation. The ravine may be silent, but its silence speaks. It tells of lives interrupted, of moral choices made and unmade, of the enduring need for remembrance. If this documentary journey has given you insight into that history, subscribe to our channel and join our Telegram archive. There you will find verified documents, authentic wartime photographs, and ongoing research into the hidden chapters of World War II. Every act of remembrance strengthens the wall against forgetting. The past cannot be changed, but it can be understood, and understanding is the beginning of prevention.